So, I wanted to say hello to everybody that has bothered to watch a couple of my rose-colored review videos covering the first 4 episodes of the X-Men original animated series. This might be a little shaky. I'm good with a script. I'm not as good improvising, but I'm going to try and make it through this video and talk about some of my thoughts here because very shortly I will watch the first episode of X-Men 97. I haven't yet. X-Men 97 is 5 episodes into its run. It's a 10-episode season, and most of the people that would have any interest in watching my videos are already up to speed on X-Men 97, and I've been keeping myself in this little cave as best I can, not watching any episodes, because I don't want my perspective on X-Men 97 to tarnish the videos that I've been making. But I got through Night of the Sentinels, and I got through Enter Magneto, and those are, to me, those are the most important ones I'm going to do. I still want to do Captive Hearts, and I still want to do Cold Comfort and other videos covering the first season. But the question becomes, how long am I going to hold off to wait before I watch X-Men 97? Because it's been very difficult avoiding spoilers. I've had some little tiny things spoil, surface level spoilers, I will say. And I am going to discuss some of those surface level spoilers that have filtered through and gotten to me. And I'm going to warn anybody watching this when I'm going to discuss those. So, but for most of you, you've already watched 5 episodes of this show. And you guys all know things I don't know yet. And what I plan to do is when I've watched some of these episodes, I'm going to give you my reaction and my thoughts on each of these. I know it's been a journey for a lot of you, and I'm sure it's going to be quite a journey for me. And I'm going to, since I went through the trouble of putting these videos down for Night of the Sentinels and Enter Magneto, and I do want to continue that for the rest of the season. I'm going to record my reactions for X-Men 97 also. So, before I do that though, this is going to be the last time that I'll really be able to talk about the original series without it being affected by what I've seen with X-Men 97. And I don't know how much that's going to change my opinion of the original series. I clearly have a very positive opinion of that right now, but I know it wasn't a perfect show. I know there were things about it that could be improved, and that this show is going to try and improve on. What I wonder is it going to improve on the original product so well that it's going to be hard to go back and watch those original episodes? Am I going to see the flaws? Are they going to be so glaring to me all of a sudden that it's going to take some of the fun out of revisiting it? That's a concern I have, because as I'm putting together these videos, I want to still have the same level of enthusiasm towards the old episodes after watching 97 as before. And I felt like part of the reason that I was staying away from it was so that Night of the Sentinels and Enter Magneto, those videos, could have an unfiltered view without any type of point of comparison. So, what are some of the other things with the original series that I wanted to get into? There are a lot of people who still really enjoy watching those original episodes, and there's a certain segment of people that feel like they haven't aged very well. And I wanted to get into why that is and why that could be and how I feel about it. I tend to feel that the show has aged very well, but I also realize I have a certain amount of blinders on because I remember what television in general was like at the time that show was on in the 90s. So subconsciously you kind of internalize certain aspects of how television was then, and if some of those are perceived as flaws by younger viewers or people that don't do that, I might kind of hand wave or give the show a pass for maybe certain lines of dialogue or certain aspects of the animation that might not be up to snuff with today's standards. Now, I also think that since the comic book movie explosion of the 2000s and the 2010s, that forces the bar to be much higher for any type of shows, whether animated or TV or cartoon or movie or anything. We've seen so many incredible shows and movies across the board. The entirety of the first four phases of the MCU, Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity War, and all of these things we've seen that have been such incredible spectacles, that have had moments that have moved us. It forces everything to be such a much tighter production. And I think 97 is going to be of that type. There are things I have questions about that maybe 97 will not do everything the way I appreciated in the original, but I'm also concerned with the opposite. So I do think that, yeah, it's kind of why I called it rose-colored reviews, that I'm probably going to have somewhat of a bias towards the original show, and there's going to be certain things that I might have even shown you in these first two videos where you might be like, I don't like that line from Sabretooth, or that part of the animation is a little sketchy or weird. It would be much better if it was done today. And I tend to look the other way sometimes. I'll try to point out the things that I still don't like. I pointed out the chemical plant workers in the Magneto episode, and that was a problem with television at the time, is the hostages and innocent lives a lot of the time were it was not as much of a priority as it would be now. You'd see buildings get blown up in all kinds of large-scale battles, and there wouldn't be any mention towards, all the lives that were lost. But when you get to Avengers in 2012, and it becomes the Battle of New York, and it becomes this big devastating thing, that is a sort of change as to how these stories have been written. It has to be a lot more practical. It has to be a lot more well thought out. And there were some loose corners back in the 90s when this animated show was coming out, that was present in the environment. So I do kind of, when I review these, I do kind of let some of those things go that you might notice. But I try to grade the show on the curve of what shows were its competition then. So generally, it's X-Men at the time was at the top of the curve, along with Batman the Animated Series. A few years later, Spider-Man the Animated Series. And the other show I thought of that was at that level, I would say, is The Simpsons. And The Simpsons is probably above everything else. I think, but it's not a superhero show. It's more of a sitcom-focused show. So there's not the same type of tropes and the same types of challenges. Batman, the Animated Series, was probably had much more mature, careful dialogue that had less likely to be goofy or cringe in how characters handled things and how it was drawn, with the exception of some of the goofy villains you might have had. But even some of the villains were straightforward. However, with Batman, I kind of think some of that could get kind of bland sometimes. Because everything was so straightforward and detective-like, and very careful in how Batman was going to deduce where and how to catch the next criminal, it might have struggled to keep my attention as a kid, and I think even as an adult. The X-Men, while they took more chances, and maybe the dialogue wasn't always as tight, they were going to grab your emotions more, and they were going to keep it lively more often. And so I sort of give them credit for, and also because it's a show about a team of mutants as opposed to one person's quest, there's always those relationships bouncing off of each other. This rivalry with these two characters, this love triangle, things like that. So, speaking of that, the primary love triangle in the animated series was Cyclops, Jean, Wolverine. Um, that was the thing they focused on most of the time. You had Rogue and Gambit as sort of a dark horse situation going on, but from what I understand with 97, they're making Rogue and Gambit a bigger part of that. Um, and from what I understand, Magneto, who is joined the team after Graduation Day, the final episode of the old series, from what I understand, that is a part of the mix right off the bat. So that'll lead me into some of the light spoilers that I've overheard that I don't know all the details fleshed out about, but here's what I know and what I've heard about 97, some of the speculation or some of the little memes that come through my feed that I might see for a second and then try and frantically scroll past. I know there is a scene somewhere in probably the first episode where Gambit sees Rogue leaving Magneto's room in the mansion and has to deal with that. That is a plot point that is maybe a little more graphic or adult oriented that you might not have seen in the original type of show. I never would have thought of Rogue and Magneto as two that could possibly get together, and I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but that's one thing I've heard going into this that I can speculate on. I know there is an episode where Jubilee, who is voiced by a different actress, is going to have some type of doppelganger or counterpart that's going to be voiced by Jubilee's original voice actress. And I'm trying to think of any of the other things I may have come across. I know that episode 5, which is titled Remember It, is going to focus on Gambit and is up till now the emotional high point of the series, or maybe low point, because I know it is there seem to be aspects of it that are heartbreaking. There's memes of people getting emotional and in tears when it's over. So, and I believe the writer of this, unfortunately, I can't think of his name offhand right now. He was let go as soon as the series was started, but he pitched Disney Marvel on this first season, and that episode 5 was the high point of that. So I am looking forward to getting to episode 5 and seeing what's in store there, but as of now, I just know I'm pretty sure it features Gambit as a central character, and that's an interesting thing that the original series rarely put the spotlight on Gambit. There were a couple of episodes. I can think of the finale of season 2, Reunion, gave Gambit and Rogue a moment where they didn't have their powers, and Gambit and Rogue were able to kiss, and that was very emotional. You had in season 2, there was a Gambit episode where he went and revisited the thieves versus assassins background that he came from. And that was really interesting and very well done. But other than that, Gambit has, as Professor X called him, played the scoundrel, the person that wasn't always a team player, couldn't always be trusted, and you didn't really know whether he was using the X-Men for his gain or whether he really believed in what they were, whether he could be counted on. That was always a bit of a question. So I guess we might dive into a little more on Gambit's character that I'm looking forward to. He's always been this mysterious figure. So that's definitely a thing I'm looking forward to. Now, here's a couple of question marks I have for X-Men 97. The animation style, similar but kind of different, and I always really liked the animation style of the original. I know it has things it did very well and things it did not do very well. So I thought what it did well is when it drew a human being or each of the characters, the way they could draw bodies, faces, felt very realistic to me. It felt like that's exactly how these characters would look in real life, as best you could do sketching it out on paper. And the landscapes and backgrounds they drew, I thought were fine. I thought they created a very realistic looking world, and it seems like the part that people have problems with is when they get into action sequences and characters have to move fast and they're battling. Sometimes the motion effect was not ideal. And you have other animation styles that might not capture the most realistic looking face or body or person or background, but when it comes time to move around and fight in battle, they can do that incredibly well. So that, I think, was kind of the trade-off that the original series had. And I'm not sure 97 is going to have that super realistic look when characters are still and not moving, but they're going to try and make up for it with a style that the characters can move around and fight and show their powers to the best that they can right now. So I don't know if I'll like it more or if I'll like it less, but I'm looking forward to that. The next thing with 97 is we have some of the characters, some of the voice actors that I really grew to love are going to be back 30 years after the fact. And some of them aren't. Some of them are going to be replaced by others, or they're going to be on the cast, but they're not going to voice the person that they originally voiced. So, I know, unfortunately, the voice of Cyclops, who was Norm Spencer, passed away a few years ago. David Hemblin, who voiced Magneto, passed away a few years ago. Obviously, they can't resume their roles. So, you plug in new voice actors for those people, and you hope they can do justice to the original. Allison Court voiced Jubilee. She's not going to voice Jubilee anymore because this was a white girl that did not feel comfortable in the current environment voicing an Asian American girl, and I totally understand that. Give that opportunity to someone who is Asian or Asian American, and that's a trade-off I can understand. At the same time, they're going to let her be in an episode with a alternate Jubilee of some sort, so that should be pretty cool. But I'm wondering, will these other actors and actresses be as satisfying and as pleasing to listen to in those roles as the originals were? So that's a question mark for me. Maybe it'll be better, maybe it'll be worse. Maybe it's a thing I got to get used to over time. And then what about the ones that are returning? Cal Dodd, Cal Dodd voiced Wolverine. George, I don't know if it's Bauza or Booza or however you say his last name, he voiced Beast. So you have some of these guys returning, and I'm glad they're returning, but it's 30 years later, so these people are going to be much, much older. Are they going to be able to replicate that voice the same way they did 30 years ago? Or will it be very apparent that they sound way older? This is supposed to take place chronologically right after the events of Graduation Day, the finale in 1997. So if some of these characters sound a lot older, that could be weird. Now, they're voice actors. It's their job to create these voices and recreate these voices. Their vocal cords is their primary tool, their primary craft. So you want to have faith that they'll be able to recreate that as well as they could have 30 years ago. And I'll see. And I'll let you know after I've watched some of these. So those are my thoughts and concerns about the new series. Those are some of my defenses towards the old series, and as far as the old series, I think it's aged well, but I can understand why other people don't think it's aged well in certain ways. But I also think the original series had a lot of dialogue and a lot of episodes that they were trying as much as they could to kind of just hit you in the throat with as much emotion and as much power and as much intensity as they could a lot of the time. There's a lot of episodes that I could rewatch all these years later that could get me emotional watching. And I know that they're going to try and push those same buttons in the new series, but I don't know if they're going to be as comfortable being as aggressive with certain issues that we've learned to become more sensitive on over time, over the decades. We're a generation now that there's trigger warnings and there's a certain sensitivity towards not pushing the envelope as much as we used to. So they might take the more subtle approach with some of those things when they took a more aggressive approach in the 90s from 92 to 97. And in this case, with the way the X-Men was done then, I really kind of appreciated the aggressive approach. Go for the maximum emotion. If it's going to make you angry, if it's going to make you cry, get every last tear out of it. I kind of enjoyed how intense that was, and maybe it will be a different type of intensity, or maybe it will be the same. I'm very fascinated to see how they're going to do that, if it's really going to feel like it's the same series from the same writers. And I know there's a lot of series that are being revived, but a lot of them are being rebooted. I don't know if there's as many series that are continuing from the same endpoint that a previous series ended on. The only comparison for me that came to mind is I grew up playing Mega Man video games. So there were 6 on the NES, and then there was one for the Super Nintendo, and then they came out with Mega Man 8 for the PlayStation. And then they made the spin-offs. They made the Mega Man X and the Zero and the Legends games, but they stopped making the games for the Blue Bomber for a total of 10 years. And then in 2008, there was a sense that people are into retro games, and that there was maybe an interest in making another Mega Man game like the original 6. So they came out with Mega Man 9 and 10 back in 2008 and 2010, and those really took what the first 6 games did and improved upon them. And I do feel like objectively those 9 and 10 are better games than the first 6 were. They had everything that the first 6 games had. They added some elements. They kept you guessing. And so I wonder if X-Men 97 is going to kind of do that. Now, there's a lot more that goes into this, because Mega Man was not a series that was really into story or dialogue very much. It was always minimalist with that. And there's so many aspects of the story and dialogue that are going to be front and center with 97. So, yeah. I'm just trying to go over any other thing here that I might have missed, because this is going to be the last time I'm really going to be talking about the old series or the new series before having seen the first episode. I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to telling you more about my reaction when I have watched each of these. So I think I'm going to stop things now, and hopefully take you on this with me, and follow up with you with some more as we go along.